You wake up when your body is ready. No alarm, no buzzing phone, no place you need to be. The light comes through the trees, and your eyes open on their own. For 99% of human history, this wasn't a luxury. This was every single morning. For roughly 300,000 years, your ancestors woke like this. And the strangest part is what came next. Almost nothing. Ask most people what life was like before farms and cities, and they picture a brutal grind. A desperate, exhausting fight for every scrap of food. Every hour spent one bad day away from starving. Feels obvious. Feels like common sense. It's also almost completely wrong. In 1963, an anthropologist named Richard Lee went to live with the Jew/Hoansi, a group of hunter-gatherers in the Kalahari Desert. He didn't just watch them. He counted. He measured exactly how many hours they spent finding food, day after day. Anthropology, by the way, is just the study of humans and how they live. And what Lee found broke the whole story apart. The adults spent about 15 hours a week getting food. 15. In one of the harshest deserts on Earth, in a place with almost no standing water, people were feeding themselves in roughly 2 hours a day. So what did they do with the rest? Before we answer that, sit with the number. 2 hours of work. You spend longer than that commuting. You spend longer than that answering messages you never wanted to receive. And these were people with no crops, no stores, no refrigerators. People we were taught to pity. Lee's work wasn't a fluke. Other researchers went to other groups on other continents and found the same thing again and again. The anthropologist Marshall Sahlins gave it a name that made a lot of people furious. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. Affluent means rich. He was saying that the people with the least were, in the way that mattered most, the richest of all. Rich in the one thing you can never buy back: time. Now, some scientists pushed back, and they were right to. They said the counting missed things. Making tools, walking long distances, carrying children, processing food, all of that adds up. So years later, a researcher named Herman Pontzer measured it a completely different way. He didn't count hours. He tracked how many calories the Hadza, hunter-gatherers in Tanzania, actually burned in a day. Not time on task. Energy spent. Real, measurable fuel. What he found was almost stranger. The Hadza burned about the same number of calories per day as an office worker in Chicago or London. Let that land. A man who walks miles and digs tubers and climbs trees for wild honey burns roughly what you burn sitting in a chair. Your body, it turns out, has a budget. Push it hard one way, and it quietly saves somewhere else. Pontzer called it constrained energy, and it means something simple and profound. The hunter-gatherer was not being ground into dust by labor. Their body ran on the same fuel as yours. They just spent their day very, very differently. So the picture of the exhausted, starving caveman? Gone. What replaces it is something you might find harder to accept. Rest. Boredom. Long, slow, empty afternoons. So let's reconstruct a day. Not a fantasy. A day built from what these studies actually describe. You wake with the sun. You're not alone. You've slept in a cluster of maybe 20 or 30 people, most of them related to you, all of them known to you by name and by story. There's no morning rush because there's nowhere to rush to. You sit. You stretch. Someone rekindles last night's fire, and the smell of smoke is the smell of home. You don't eat a big breakfast. You might not eat much at all yet. Food comes when food comes. Your body is used to that rhythm, the small gaps between meals that we now have to invent on purpose and call fasting. By mid-morning, a few of you head out. In most of these societies, it's the women who bring in the majority of the calories, day after day, through gathered plant food, not the meat the hunters chase. This matters because the cartoon in your head is probably a man with a spear, but the quiet engine of survival was usually a woman with a digging stick and decades of knowledge about exactly which roots, which berries, which plants in which season would keep a family alive. And here is where you meet someone the old story left out entirely. The grandmother. An anthropologist named Kristen Hawkes spent years watching the Hadza, and she noticed something the textbooks had missed. The hardest-working, most productive foragers in the whole camp were often the older women. The grandmothers. Long past childbearing, they were out every day, digging tubers, gathering more food than they needed for themselves, and feeding it to their grandchildren. Hawkes turned this into what's now called the grandmother hypothesis. The idea is startling. One reason humans live so long past the age of having babies, unlike almost any other animal, may be that grandmothers who kept feeding the next generation helped that generation survive. Your long life. Your grandmother. It may be written into your species precisely because those extra hands mattered. Because raising a child here was never one exhausted parent doing it alone. The anthropologist Sarah Blaffer HRDY calls humans cooperative breeders. It means the child is passed from arms to arms, held by aunts, older siblings, grandparents, friends. A baby among the F of the Congo might be handed to 5, 10, 15 different people in a single day. The child is never truly alone, and the mother is never truly trapped. Compare that to a new parent today, isolated in a quiet apartment at 3 in the morning, doing it all with no one. Which of you is living the strange, unnatural life? By early afternoon, the food is mostly in. And then, for hours, there is simply nothing you have to do. You nap in the shade. You mend a tool you don't really need to mend. You gossip. You groom. Children run in loud, unsupervised packs, learning everything they will ever need by copying the adults around them. There is no school because life is the school. A boy learns to track by following real tracks. A girl learns which plants heal and which plants kill by walking beside a grandmother who knows. Nobody sits them down. Nobody grades them. They simply become, slowly, the adults they see. And there are no bosses. This is one of the hardest things for a modern mind to truly absorb, so slow down here. For most of human history, there was almost no hierarchy at all. No kings. No landlords. No one who could tell you what to do and make it stick. The anthropologist Christopher Bohm studied this closely and gave it a name. He called it a reverse dominance hierarchy. In most animal groups, the strongest individual bullies the rest into obedience. But in human foraging bands, Bohm found the opposite. The group, all of them together, kept any single would-be bully from rising up. If a man became arrogant, boastful, greedy, if he tried to lord it over others, the group had tools. They mocked him. They ignored him. They refused to cooperate. And if he pushed far enough, in the most extreme cases, they might even drive him out or worse. The anthropologist Jerome Lewis, who lived with the Mbenjel in the Congo, saw the same fierce equality. A skilled hunter who killed a large animal was not celebrated as a hero. He was often teased, made fun of, kept humble. Because a man who feels too important is a threat to a group that survives only by sharing. There is even a name for it in some societies. Insulting the meat. You bring back a great kill, and instead of praise, your friends tell you it's scrawny, pathetic, barely worth carrying. It sounds cruel. It is actually genius. It keeps the successful from ever believing they are above the rest. Think about what that means. For hundreds of thousands of years, the normal human condition was to answer to no one, to be no one's servant, to share what you had because hoarding was not just rude, it was dangerous to the whole group. The world of bosses and rent and being ordered around by someone who owns more than you, that world is astonishingly new. And then the sun goes down, and something happens that might be the most human thing of all. The anthropologist Polly Wiessner studied the Jew/Hoansi for decades, and she noticed a pattern in what people talked about. During the day, by the harsh light of the sun, conversation was practical. Complaints, arguments, land, food, who took too much, who didn't share, the small friction of living close together. But at night, around the fire, the talk changed completely. At night, they told stories. Wiessner found that over 80% of the long nighttime conversations were stories. Tales of people who lived far away. Myths of how the world was made. Adventures of ancestors, both real and imagined. The songs. The jokes. The impressions of people everyone knew. The firelight stretched the day and turned it into something else entirely. It was here Wiessner argued that culture itself was carried forward, where a child learned who their people were, where the invisible map of the whole social world was drawn and redrawn in the dark, where imagination was fed. You didn't have entertainment. You were the entertainment, all of you together every single night, and it wasn't only stories. Because these people, the ones we imagine as simple and crude, made beauty. Real, breathtaking beauty, long before farming, long before cities. In a cave called Blombos, on the coast of South Africa, archaeologists found a small piece of red ochre, a soft stone, carefully engraved with a crisscross pattern. It is around 75,000 years old. Someone sat down, tens of thousands of years before the first field was ever planted, and made a design for no reason except that they wanted to. In the same cave, shell beads, jewelry. Someone wanted to be beautiful. In Chauvet cave in France, over 30,000 years old, the walls explode with painted horses and lions and rhinos, drawn with a skill that would humble many artists alive today. And in a place called Sungur in Russia, archaeologists uncovered burials from around 34,000 years ago, where the dead were laid to rest covered in thousands of hand-carved ivory beads. Thousands. Each bead may have taken an hour or more to make. Do the math on the time. These people, with their 2-hour workdays, spent enormous stretches of that free afternoon making art for the dead, honoring them, believing clearly in something beyond the visible world. This is what they did all day. They rested. They raised children together. They kept each other humble. They gathered and shared. They told stories by firelight. And they made beauty, and buried their dead with tenderness, and looked up at the stars with the same wondering eyes you have now. And what about sleep? Here too, the story you've been told is mostly backwards. We tend to imagine that before electric light, people slept like the dead, 10 blissful hours from dusk to dawn. But a sleep researcher named Jerome Siegel decided to actually measure it. His team put sensors on the Hadza in Tanzania, the San in Namibia, and the Tsimane in Bolivia, 3 groups living close to the old way, on 3 different continents. What they found surprised almost everyone. These people slept less than you might expect. Often only 6 to 7 hours a night. They did not go to sleep when the sun set. They stayed up for hours after dark, by the fire, talking. They fell asleep as the night grew cold, and they woke, most of them, before the sun came up in the chill just before dawn. And here is the part that should stop you cold. In the languages of 2 of these groups, there was no word for insomnia. No word for lying awake at night, unable to sleep, your mind racing. The condition was so rare it did not need a name. Think about how many people you know who cannot sleep, who lie awake glowing screens into their eyes, hearts racing over emails and money and time. Siegel's work suggests this is not the ancient human condition. It is a modern wound. Your ancestors were not drugged by exhaustion into sleep. They simply lived in a way and moved in a way and worried in a way that let sleep come, because their bodies were not like yours. And that difference runs deep. The evolutionary biologist Daniel Lieberman has spent his career studying the human body and the world it was built for. And he argues that many of the illnesses that fill our hospitals today are what he calls mismatched diseases. A mismatched disease is what happens when a body shaped for one world is dropped into a completely different one. Your body was tuned over hundreds of thousands of years for a life of constant gentle movement, whole natural food, and long stretches of rest. It was never designed to sit in a chair for 10 hours, eat sugar by the fistful, and stare at a screen until midnight. So the body pushes back. Type 2 diabetes, which was once almost unknown, now stalks the modern world. Heart disease, certain cancers, flat feet, back pain, nearsightedness, anxiety. Lieberman's point is not that the past was a paradise of perfect health. Childbirth was dangerous. Infections could kill. A broken leg could be a death sentence. But the slow, grinding diseases that most of us will actually die from, your foraging ancestors largely did not get them. Not because they were lucky, because they were living the exact life their bodies were built for. They walked all day easily without thinking of it as exercise. They ate when hungry and stopped when full, food with no labels and no factories behind it. They sat on the ground, squatted, rose, bent, and carried, keeping strong the whole life through. There were no gyms because there was no need for them. Movement was simply woven into being alive. You, by contrast, have to schedule your walking. You pay money to lift heavy objects and put them back down in a room built for it. You buy standing desks to undo your sitting. You take pills to sleep. Almost every wellness trend you have ever heard of is, when you look closely, just an attempt to bolt one missing piece of the ancient life back onto the modern one. So here's the twist, the uncomfortable one. We usually tell the story of human progress as a straight line up. First we were poor, hungry hunter-gatherers, scraping by. Then we invented farming and everything got better. More food, more comfort, more free time. Onward and upward, forever. But look at what farming actually did to the human body, and the line doesn't go up. It bends down. When humans took up agriculture, their skeletons tell the story, and bones don't lie. People got shorter. In some regions, the average person lost inches of height that took thousands of years to win back. Their teeth rotted, coated in sugar from grain-heavy diets. Signs of anemia and malnutrition appear in graves that had never shown them before. New diseases jumped from the animals now crowded beside us, and from the crowded, dirty settlements themselves. Measles, tuberculosis, flu. The great plagues of history were a gift from the farm. At an ancient site called Abu Huraira in Syria, the archaeologist Andrew Moore's team found something haunting in the bones of the early farmers. The skeletons of the women showed damaged knees, curved toes, and enlarged neck vertebrae, the marks of endless hours spent kneeling, grinding grain on a stone, day after day after day. Their bodies were literally deformed by the labor of farming. At Çatalhöyük in Turkey, one of the world's first towns, people lived packed together on top of each other, breathing smoke, surrounded by their own waste, riddled with infection. And the work exploded. Farming doesn't take 2 hours a day. It takes everything you have, from dawn to dark, forever, because the field will not wait. The weeds will not stop, and the harvest can still fail and leave you with nothing. There's a reason the giant stone temple at Göbekli Tepe, built right at the dawn of this transition, may have driven people to settle down and toil in the first place. Once you commit to the land owns you. The writer and anthropologist James Sussman spent years living with the Jew/Hoansi, and he framed it as plainly as anyone. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans worked little and wanted little, and that was not a failure of ambition. It was a strategy that worked brilliantly. Farming didn't free us. In many ways, it trapped us. It let us grow in number, yes. It built everything you see around you. But for the average person actually living through it, early farming often meant a harder, shorter, hungrier, sicker life than the one their foraging grandparents had known. So why did we do it? Not because someone chose it as a better life. Farming crept in slowly, one small decision at a time, each one reasonable, until the trap had closed and there was no walking back. More food meant more children. More children meant more mouths. More mouths meant more farming. And once there were too many of you to feed by foraging, the old free life was simply gone, and no one alive even remembered it. We didn't climb out of a harsh past into an easy present. We may have walked out of an easy past into a harder one, and simply called it progress because there were more of us to tell the story. Now bring it back to you, to this morning, to your alarm. You live surrounded by more food, more comfort, more medicine, and more safety than any hunter-gatherer could have dreamed of. Take that seriously. You would likely not trade your antibiotics, your dentist, your protection from the cold, for their world. Nobody is telling you to, but be honest about what you traded away to get it. You feel tired in a way they might not have understood. You feel rushed. You feel like there is never enough time, even though almost nothing in your world is trying to kill you. You lie awake at 3 in the morning, alone with your child, or alone with your worries, and no fire, no circle of familiar faces, no story in the dark. Why does a life this safe feel this heavy? Because the things your ancestors had in abundance are the exact things your world is built to take. Unstructured time, empty afternoons, real equality answering to no master, many hands to raise a child, long nights of story with people who know your name. Your body still expects all of it. It was shaped by 300,000 years of it, and it notices quietly when they are gone. You are not broken when you long to do nothing. You are not lazy when a free hour makes you restless with guilt. You are remembering. Somewhere inside you is a creature built for 2 hours of work and a whole afternoon of shade. A creature made for the fire, and the story, and the slow, unhurried talk after dark. A creature that was never meant to do all of this alone. So the next time an empty hour opens up, and you feel that strange itch to fill it, that voice that says you should be productive, listen closely. That voice is very new. It is only a few thousand years old. It is the voice of the field, and the boss, and the harvest that will not wait. The part of you that just wants to sit in the light and do nothing at all, that part is older than farming, older than cities, older than kings and money, and almost everything you have been taught to call civilization. That part of you wakes when your body is ready. No alarm, no schedule, no place it needs to be. It has been waiting for that morning for 300,000 years. And it is still quietly waiting now,